The key turned in the lock with a small, satisfied click. On the wrong side of that door stood the new governess, in the snow, in the dark, on the coldest night of the year. "You will sleep in the cold tonight," said Lavinia Crewe through the oak, "and think hard on where my silver went." The governess did not pound on the wood. She did not beg. She set her back to the storm and looked at the lit windows of Ravensworth Hall, and her breath came out white and even. Inside, the house was warm with candles and the smell of roasting goose. Lavinia Crewe smoothed her skirts and walked back toward that warmth, pleased with herself, certain she had just rid the household of a thieving girl who would be gone by morning and forgotten by spring. She was wrong on every count. The woman shivering on the step was not a thief. She was not a servant. Her name was not Jane Reed. And she had not come to Ravensworth Hall to mind a child or carry coal. She had come to learn how her sister died. A year before, on a night just like this one, another young woman had stood at that same door with the same key turned against her, and that one had not lived to see the dawn. The family had been told she ran off, a thief, in disgrace. The family had believed it. This one did not. Lavinia Crewe thought she had locked a servant out in the snow. What she had truly done was far worse for her. She would not understand it until the doors of her own bright hall opened against her before the night was through. The woman who locked one sister out in the snow had just opened the door to the other. 3 weeks earlier, in a far warmer room, the same woman had sat very still while a lawyer read her the lie one more time. Her name was Lady Cassandra Vey, and she was the daughter of an earl. On the northern moors her face meant nothing, for she had never been seen there, but her name, spoken in the right drawing-rooms of London, opened any door she pleased. She had money of her own, and the patience of someone who had learned that the world tells the truth only when it believes no one important is listening. The letter on the table was the one the Duke of Ravensworth's household had sent her family the winter before. It said that Esther Vey, Governess, had stolen silver from the hall and fled in the night rather than face the magistrate. It said she had run. Cassandra read that word and felt it the way one feels a splinter pushed deeper. Ran. Her sister Esther, who wept at a drowned kitten, who walked back 2 miles in the rain to return a coin given in error, who had taken a governess's post only because she loved children and would not be a burden, that Esther had supposedly stuffed silver in a bag and run into a Yorkshire blizzard. Cassandra had read the letter 100 times. She did not believe a line of it. "There is a death record," the lawyer said carefully. "The village physician, a Dr. Brandt, found her in the snow some days after, frozen. The household says she perished in flight, as a guilty woman fleeing arrest. Did the household look for her the night she went out?" "The papers do not say, my lady." "No," Cassandra said. "I did not think they would." She rose and went to the window. Somewhere to the north, behind miles of white moor, a great house had taken her gentle sister, used her, and buried her under an ugly word. The law had been satisfied. Society had moved on. A grieving duke had signed whatever was put before him, and shut himself in his study, and the matter was closed. Cassandra Vey had no intention of leaving it closed. She would not write a letter of complaint to a man too sunk in grief to read it. She would not send a lawyer to be turned away at the gate by whoever ran that house now. People did not show their true faces to an earl's daughter arriving in a crested carriage. They showed it to the powerless, to the girl carrying the coal scuttle, to the one who could do nothing back. "I am going north," she told the lawyer. "As yourself, my lady?" "No," Cassandra said, "as no one at all. Let us see how they treat those they believe beneath them. That is the only honest account I'm ever going to get." The post had been easy to learn of and easier to take. Ravensworth Hall needed a new governess for the Duke's small daughter, and no respectable woman would travel to the bleak end of the moors in midwinter for a servant's wage. The position had stood open since the last governess disgraced herself and ran. Cassandra answered it in a plain hand under a plain name. She made herself small in stages. The rings came off first, the Earl's signet and her mother's pearls, and went into a velvet box she left with her maid in the inn at the market town. The fine travelling gown was folded away. In its place went grey wool, mended at the cuff, and a white cap that hid most of her hair, and a thin cloak never meant for a moor in January. Her maid watched, unhappy. "You will be cold, my lady. You will be cold and alone, and no one there will know your name to help you. That is rather the point. And if they are only careless, only ordinary, houses are often unkind without being wicked." Cassandra studied the stranger forming in the spotted glass. The Earl's daughter was disappearing from it, stitch by stitch, until a tired governess looked back at her instead, the sort of woman a fine lady's eye slides over without stopping. "If they are only careless," she said, "then my sister merely froze by accident, and I will grieve her and come home. But careless people do not write that a dead girl was a thief. Someone needed her to be one. I mean to find out who and why." She practiced the new name aloud until it sat easy in her mouth. Jane Reed, a governess of no family worth mentioning, glad of any place that would feed her. At dawn she took the carrier's cart the last cold miles. Not a carriage. Ravensworth Hall rose out of the white at the end of it, and she looked at it for a long moment, learning its face. It was a grand house. It was, she thought, a beautiful house trying very hard to look old. All new battlements and fresh-cut stone dressed up as ancient stock. Somewhere inside, someone had spent a great deal of money making it appear to be more than it was. She had the cart set her down at the foot of the drive and walked the rest on foot to the rear, the way a servant comes. The wind found every gap in the thin cloak. By the time she reached the kitchen door, her hands had gone white. She lifted them and knocked. Jane Reed entire, and stepped down into the world that had killed her sister. No one welcomed her. A boot boy let her in and left her dripping in a stone passage that smelled of coal smoke and cold mutton fat, and there she waited, watching, which was what she did best. The servants' part of Ravensworth Hall told the truth the grand front never would. The fires here were small and grudging, the faces were thin. Everyone moved quickly and spoke quietly, with one ear always turned toward the upstairs bell, and Cassandra had been inside the house perhaps 10 minutes before she understood that this was a household run on fear. The source of the fear came down the passage in good silk. Miss Lavinia Crewe had been the late Duchess's companion, and now that the Duchess was a year in the ground, and the Duke would see no one, she ran Ravensworth Hall as though it were her own. She was a handsome woman of perhaps 40, warm-voiced, with a smile she could switch on like a lamp. She wore the late Duchess's lace at her throat. She held the keys of the house at her waist, and she touched them often, the way another woman touches a jewel. "You are the governess," she said, and the smile arrived. "Jane Reed, how brave of you to come all this way in such weather." The warmth was real on the surface and an inch deep, and Cassandra, watching it, felt the first cold certainty settle in her chest. This was a face that performed. Then a kitchen maid, hurrying past with a laden tray, caught her foot on the worn flag and dropped a dish of butter. The smile went out. "Clumsy little fool." Lavinia did not raise her voice. That was the worst of it. She bent close to the girl who had gone grey and spoke low and pleasant. "That is 2 shillings off your wage, Polly, and you will go without supper, since you cannot be trusted near food. Now clean it before it marks my floor." Polly Crisp, who could not have been more than 17, dropped to her knees on the cold stone and began to wipe up butter with her bare hands, and she did not cry, because she had clearly learned long ago that crying cost more. "Such a trial, keeping servants honest," Lavinia said to Cassandra. The lamp switched warm again. "You will find the child in the nursery. Try to last longer than the last one." And she swept away in her borrowed lace, keys chiming. Cassandra crouched and helped the girl gather the broken dish. Polly flinched from the kindness as from a raised hand. "You needn't," the girl whispered. "She'll mark you for it." "Let her." Cassandra pressed the last shard into her own palm and met the girl's frightened eyes. What was the name of the governess before me? The one who left? Polly went still as a hare. "We're not to speak of her." "Then you needn't say it aloud," Cassandra said gently, "and let it go. For now." Upstairs the house changed its skin. The corridors widened, the carpets thickened, the cold lifted a little, and in a too large nursery she found a small girl sitting alone by a window, watching the snow. Lady Imogen Ravensworth was 6 years old, and had her mother in the ground and her father behind a study door, and she looked up at the new governess with the careful, hopeful, braced look of a child who has learned that grown people leave. "Are you going to go away too?" Imogen asked. "No," said Cassandra, and found, to her own surprise, that she meant it. "I am not. The world reveals itself," she thought, watching the child's thin shoulders unbend by half an inch, when it believes no one important is watching. She had been at Ravensworth Hall less than an hour, and already the house had told her almost everything she needed to know. For a week Cassandra carried coal, and minded the child and listened through the thin walls, and the house grew used to her, which was what she wanted. A servant who is no longer new becomes a piece of furniture, and furniture hears a great deal. It was Polly who drew Lavinia's anger down on the governess at last. The girl had slipped up to the nursery one evening with half a meat pie hidden under her apron, a kindness for the child who was thin. Lavinia found them, the maid and the governess and the child, sharing it by the small fire. "So, this is where my kitchen goes." The voice was soft. "Stealing food now, the pair of you, and teaching the Duke's daughter to do the same." "It was mine to give," Cassandra said level. "Lady Imogen was hungry." The slap came fast and cracked through the nursery like a snapped branch. Imogen gasped. Polly shrank against the wall. The red mark bloomed on Cassandra's cheek, and her head turned with the blow, and then turned slowly back. She did not weep. She did not lift a hand. She straightened and let her gaze come to rest on Lavinia Crew's face, and there was no plea in it at all. That stillness reached Lavinia in a way no scream would have. For just a moment something flickered behind the handsome eyes, the uncertainty of a person who strikes and finds nothing to strike against. "You forget yourself," Lavinia said, recovering. "I can put you out of this house in a single breath." "I'm sure you can," Cassandra said. "You have done it before." The eyes narrowed, but Cassandra had already turned to gather the frightened child. The matter apparently closed, and Lavinia, after a moment, gathered her keys and her dignity and left. Later, on the dark servants' stair, Cassandra found Polly waiting for her, white and shaking. "You shouldn't have said that. About before. She'll watch you now." "Let her watch." Cassandra took the girl's cold hands in both of hers. "Polly, the last governess. Esther. You saw what happened to her, didn't you, the night she went out?" The girl's whole face crumpled with a year of held terror. "I can't. If I tell, I'll be next." She turned Nan Tucker out 2 winters back for less, branded her a thief, and we never heard of Nan again. "They die out there, Miss Reed. In the snow. They die." "I know they do," Cassandra said very quietly. "Someone I loved died out there. That is why I have come." Polly stared at her, not understanding, only feeling the iron under the gentle voice. "I am not asking you to be brave tonight," Cassandra went on. "Only to remember. Cold has a long memory, Polly. So do I. When the time comes, all you will have to do is tell the truth out loud, and I promise you that you will be safe to do it. Until then, say nothing, and watch." She climbed to her cold little room that night, with the print of a hand still warm on her face, and she did not think of it as an injury. She thought of it as the first clear entry in an account that was, at last, beginning to be written down. The estate office stood at the end of a cold passage on the ground floor, and Lavinia kept it locked. Cassandra had marked it the first day, a room a housekeeper guards that closely as a room with something to guard. Her chance came on the 2nd week, when Lavinia had a visitor from the market town and forgot, in her own assurance, to close the door fully behind them. Cassandra was passing with a tray of cooling tea, the most invisible thing in the world. She slowed her step. She set the tray on a side table, as though to rest her arms, and she listened. The visitor was a thin, anxious man Cassandra had seen before, a moneylender's clerk who came up from the town with a leather case. "The accounts cannot bear another year of this, Miss Crewe," he was saying. "The figures you send to the Duke and the figures that are true are now so far apart that any honest steward would see it in an afternoon." "The Duke has not looked at a ledger since his wife died," Lavinia said. Her voice had lost all its warmth. This was the face she showed only to those she thought could not harm her. "He signs what I put before him. The true book stays in my hands. The book he sees says what I wish it to say. Where is the difficulty? The difficulty, madam, is that you have taken near £4,000 out of this estate in 2 years, and the child's inheritance with it, and one day that child will have guardians who count. The child is 6. By the time anyone counts, the money will have done its work, and I shall be somewhere warm and respectable, and no one will think to ask a grieving companion how she came by it." A small sound, perhaps a laugh. "I have managed cleverer doubters than you. There was the governess," the clerk said carefully. "The Vey girl. She counted." A silence. Cassandra's hand went still on the tray. "The Vey girl," Lavinia said, "got into this room when she should not have, and copied a page she should not have seen, and then was foolish enough to let me know she had it. So she became a thief. A little silver gone, a little silver found pawned in the town under her name, a magistrate written to. She ran rather than face it. A pause. Or so the record says. The snow saw the rest, and the snow keeps its counsel. You turned her out in a blizzard. I locked a thieving girl out of my house, Lavinia said. What the weather did after is not on my conscience. Servants are replaceable, Mr. Pell. This one replaced herself with another quiet, friendless creature only last week. If that one grows troublesome, the moor is still there, and the winter is long. Cassandra stood in the cold passage with the tray in her 2 hands and made herself breathe. Every word she had come north to find had just been spoken aloud, in that warm voice behind that locked but not locked door. Her sister had not run. She had been robbed of her name to cover a theft of £4,000, and then left to freeze to keep her quiet. Footsteps turned toward the door. Cassandra lifted her tray and smoothed her face into the blankness of a servant. She walked on down the passage without hurry. Not one drop of tea trembled in the cups. Now Cassandra knew the whole of it. Now she had to prove it, and quickly, because a woman who freezes inconvenient servants does not leave a watching one alive for long. She began with the nursery wall. Esther had been governess in that same room. If her gentle, careful sister had copied a page she should not have, and feared what would come of it, she would not have carried it on her person where a search would find it. She would have hidden it where she spent her days, near the child she loved. Cassandra knew her sister's mind because in many ways it was her own. It took 2 nights of quiet searching, the child asleep, a single candle shaded with her hand. Behind the cold hearth, low down where the plaster met the brick, one brick sat looser than its neighbours. Cassandra worked it free with a hairpin, and her heart turned over. Folded behind it were 2 papers, and in the dark she knew her sister's writing before she could read a word. The first was a letter, the ink blotted as if written in cold and in haste. It was dated the very night Esther had been put out of doors. It named Lavinia Crewe. It said the accounts were false and thousands were stolen. Esther had found the true ledger and copied a page. Miss Crewe had discovered it and meant to be rid of her. If I am turned out and not heard of again, the letter ended. Look first to her and know I was no thief. Look to the door. Esther. The second paper was the copied page itself, a column of true figures in Esther's hand, the figures the Duke had never been shown. Cassandra knelt on the nursery floor with her sister's last words in her hands, and did not weep, though it cost her everything she had not to. There would be time to weep when it was finished. Now there was work. She moved fast after that, and unseen. By the carrier she sent a letter to her maid at the town inn. Through her it would reach her lawyer in the south. It held one name, Nan Tucker. The chambermaid turned out 2 winters before, branded a thief, vanished. Find her if she lives. Cassandra had begun to suspect that a woman who used the same trick twice might have grown careless the first time and left a witness who had survived the snow. She walked the 3 miles to the village in a brief thaw and called, as Jane Reed, on Dr. Elias Brandt, who had found her sister dead. The old physician went very still when she spoke Esther's name with quiet purpose, and then he went to a locked drawer. "I've waited a year for someone to ask the right questions," he said. "I wrote what I found, and no one would read it. She did not die fleeing, miss. She died standing against a barred door, frozen where she had beaten upon it. I have it in the record, in my own hand. And this." He laid a scrap of paper in her palm. "She pressed it on me the week before, frightened, and bade me keep it safe. I think now she knew. It was a pawnbroker's receipt, for a quantity of Ravensworth silver, signed in the town by a hand that was not Esther's at all, the hand of Lavinia Crewe. The instruments were gathering now, one by one, the dead and the living both, the letter from the wall, the copied page, the doctor's record, the receipt, and word came back at last along the carrier's road, brief and electric. Nan Tucker lived. Nan Tucker, working in service far to the south, would come north and stand up and speak, if a great house and a magistrate could be made to listen. There was only one night in the year when all the great families of the moors gathered under Ravensworth's own roof, and the parish magistrate among them. There Lavinia could not bar a door against them, or send the truth out into the snow. 12th night was 3 days off, but Lavinia Crewe had not survived by being slow. She had felt the new governess's stillness, and she did not like it, and on the morning before the feast she struck first. She had the servants' rooms searched, and in Jane Reed's plain box, beneath the mended grey wool, a footman found a heavy silver candlestick that had not been there the night before. "A thief," Lavinia said softly in the cold passage, before the assembled, frightened staff, the keys bright at her waist. "Another one. I have an eye for them." Her smile was a closed door. "You will be put out tonight. Mr. Pell shall fetch the magistrate in the morning, and you may explain to him in the snow how my candlestick walked into your box. Lock her out when the dark comes. Let the cold have her." She believed she had won. She believed she was repeating a thing that had worked before, and that the more would do the rest. She had no idea she had just chosen the worst possible night, before the worst possible witnesses, to do it twice. So it was that on 12th night, on the coldest night of the year, the key turned in the lock with a small, satisfied click. The new governess stood out in the snow and the dark. Behind her, the great hall of Ravensworth Hall blazed with light. "You will sleep in the cold tonight," Lavinia had said through the oak, "and think hard on where my silver went." Then she had gone back to her guests. But Cassandra Vey had not come this far to die against a door as her sister had. She had only needed Lavinia to believe she would. She walked around the lit house to the great door at the front. The carriages of the county still stood steaming on the gravel. There old Mr. Hobb, the butler, waited in the cold porch as though he had been waiting for her all his life. The old man had watched 2 governesses framed in 2 winters and held his tongue out of fear. That morning Cassandra had told him quietly who she was and what she carried. He had wept. The once. Then he had squared his shoulders. "It is time, Hobb," she said. "It is past time, my lady," he answered, and he opened the great door. The warmth and the light and the sound of 40 voices rolled out over the snow. The governess walked in out of the dark. The hall was full. The neighbouring families in silk and diamonds, the candles in their hundreds, Lavinia Crewe at the centre of it in the late Duchess's pearls, holding court, and in a deep chair near the fire sat Gabriel Ravensworth, Duke of Ravensworth, drawn out of his study for the one night he could not refuse. He was grey and grief-worn and looking at none of it. The talk faltered as the plain grey figure crossed the bright floor. A governess, snow in her hair, walking, uninvited, into the middle of the county. Lavinia's face went white, then a furious red. "How dare you? Hobb, remove this creature. She is a dismissed thief. She has no place." "Mr. Hobb will do no such thing," Cassandra said, and her voice, though quiet, carried to every corner of the silenced room. She did not hurry. She turned to the gathering, and to one stout, grave gentleman among them in particular. "You are the parish magistrate, sir. I have heard your name. I am glad you are here. You will be needed." "I will not stand for this," Lavinia hissed. "She is no one. She is a servant I caught stealing this very day. There are no witnesses to anything but her own guilt. The only witness to the rest is the snow, and the snow tells no tales." "That is the second time you have trusted the snow to keep your secrets," Cassandra said. She reached up and drew the white governess's cap from her head. She let it fall to the floor. She shook her hair loose and stood straight in her plain grey wool as though it were cloth of gold. "You called the snow your only witness. I'm sorry to tell you it kept a second one." Hobb's voice rang out across the hall, full and unafraid for the first time in 2 years. "My lords, my ladies, this is no governess. This is Lady Cassandra Vey, daughter of the Earl of Marlow, and she is the sister of Esther Vey, whom this house buried as a thief 1 year ago." The room stopped breathing. A glass shattered somewhere on the stone. A dowager rose half out of her chair. The magistrate was on his feet, and Lavinia Crewe swayed once, the keys of Ravensworth still chiming at her waist. She put out a hand and caught the back of a chair. The colour poured out of her handsome face like water. The Duke of Ravensworth lifted his grey head, and for the first time in a year, truly looked. "This is madness," Lavinia said, fighting for her footing. "Grief has turned the girl's head. She will say anything." "Then let us not take my word for any of it," Cassandra said. "Let us take yours, and theirs." She turned to the magistrate, and she laid the truth on the long table one piece at a time, and each piece landed like a hammer in the silent hall. "My sister did not steal your silver. You stole it yourself and pawned it in the town under her name. Here is the receipt, signed in your own hand, kept these 12 months by Dr. Brandt, who is at the door." The old physician stepped in from the porch, his record in his hand. "I examined Esther Vey," he said to the magistrate plainly. "She did not die in flight. She died standing, beating upon a barred door, frozen where she fell against it. I wrote it true a year ago and was not heard. I will swear to it now. My sister did not run off a thief, Cassandra went on. She found that you have taken near £4,000 from this estate and from this child in 2 years of forged accounts. Here is the page she copied in her own hand, the true figures set against the book you showed His Grace. And here, in her own writing, the letter she hid in the nursery wall the night you locked her out, naming you, begging that someone look to you, and to the door. She set the letter before the Duke himself. His hands shook as he read it. "And I am not the first to find you out," Cassandra said, "nor the first you turned into the snow. Come in, Nan." Nan Tucker walked into the great hall of Ravensworth, alive, 2 winters after Lavinia Crewe had branded her a thief and put her out to die. She was thinner than she had been, and her hands were rough with honest work, but she was very much living, and she looked Lavinia Crewe full in the face. "You told them I ran too," Nan said. "I didn't run. I crawled to a shepherd's hut and he kept me from dying, and I have been afraid every day since to come back. I'm not afraid now." Then Polly Crisp, white and trembling, stepped out from the servants crowded in the doorway, with no one forcing her, and said the thing she had been too frightened to say for a year. "I saw you bar the door on Esther, Miss Crewe. I heard her knock. You told us all she'd run, and you said you'd put the next one out the same if we ever told. I'm telling now." Lavinia turned to the room, to the silk and the diamonds, reaching for the warm lamp of her smile, and found it would not light. "You cannot believe servants over— You wrote that my sister ran." Cassandra's voice cut clean across hers, and at last there was iron in it, undisguised. "She did not run. She froze against a door you turned the key on. The wound, carried north all this way, she set down for good. A thief takes silver. You took a life and a good name with it, and tonight you answer for all 3. The magistrate stepped forward. "Miss Crewe, by the evidence laid before me here, I am taking you in charge for theft, for forgery, and for the death of Esther Vey. You will be held against the assize." Lavinia's legs gave, and she sat down hard in the chair, and the keys of Ravensworth slid from her waist and rang on the stone floor, and no one moved to pick them up. The Duke of Ravensworth rose from his deep chair like a man coming up out of deep water. He crossed the hall to Cassandra, and before all the county he stopped, and his voice was hoarse with a year of blindness. "She ran my house in my name, and I never once looked up. Your sister died under my roof, and I signed the lie myself." He could barely say it. "I failed her. I failed every soul in this house. I trusted a smile, and I never asked the cost. Forgive me, though I have no right to ask it." "It is not me you must answer to," Cassandra said. "It is your daughter and the people who serve you. Begin with them." She turned then, and walked from the bright hall without a backward glance at the woman in the chair, out to where old Hob stood holding the great door open to the night, and the cold air came in clean. The snow held the moors until March, and then the thaw came, and with it the assize. Lavinia Crewe stood before the court for theft, for forgery, and for the death of Esther Vey. The same papers that had detonated in the great hall convicted her in the cold light of the law. Her forged books were undone column by column. The £4,000 was traced and clawed back into the estate. Lady Imogen's inheritance, every shilling of it, was restored to the child it had been stolen from. Lavinia Crewe went to jail, and there she stayed. The warm, respectable life she had meant to buy with another woman's death never came. There was no second chance for her, and Cassandra was asked for one only once by a soft-hearted neighbour who pitied any woman in irons. Cassandra's answer was quiet and final. "A foolish heart may mend. A cruel one rarely does." She had a year to feel for the girl she froze, and she spent it spending the money. No. In the spring thaw they all went up to the moorland churchyard, the Duke and his daughter Cassandra, and half the household. They took down the small mean stone that bore only a name and a date, and the silence that had meant shame. In its place they set a new one, recut deep and clear. It carried Esther Vey's true name and her years, and beneath them 2 words the whole parish would now read and know to be true. No thief. The lie that she had run was struck from every mouth that had ever carried it. At last it was simply gone, as if the snow that had hidden the truth had melted off it entirely. The house changed with the season. Nan Tucker was given honest work, and more than that, a character at last, a written word of good faith to carry wherever she chose to go. And she chose to stay. Polly Crisp was kept on, her wages whole, her supper her own, and she learned slowly that she could drop a dish now without going grey. Old Hobbs stood the straighter for having spoken at the end, and the Duke of Ravensworth came out from behind his study door for good. He learned the names of the people who served him, everyone. He ran his own house, and he raised his daughter himself, and Imogen, who had braced all her short life for the people she loved to leave, slowly stopped bracing. On a mild morning when the moor had gone green, he found Cassandra by the new stone in the churchyard. "You came here as no one at all," he said. "Jane Reed, glad of any place. I should like, if you would allow it, to know the woman who was always standing there instead. Not as a servant, as yourself. Stay, not for wages, for your own name, and whatever it may grow into." Cassandra looked a long moment at her sister's stone, at the two clear words cut into it, and something that had been clenched in her for a year and more let go. "I will stay," she said, "as myself." She laid her hand flat on the cold stone one last time before she turned to go. The vow she made there was not loud, but she meant every word of it, for Esther, for Nan, for Polly, and for every quiet soul a great house had ever thought too small to matter. Snow melts in its season. The truth it was meant to hide does not. Pride may wear diamonds, but it is character that wears forever, and it is proven not by how grandly one is treated, but by how one treats the people who can do nothing in return. If this story moved you, take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications, so the next tale finds its way to you. And tell me below, was Cassandra right to refuse that woman any mercy at all, or should even the cruel be given a second chance? And while you are there, let me know where in the world you are watching from tonight.